Okay. Alright, okay. Get the fuck in here. Alright. Yeah, let Boris know that I'm going to be at the next Downing Street party, and also tell Prince Andrew that I need to reschedule that meeting. Okay. Alright, okay. So where were we?
We were talking about our morals as a company, and that you want to convince fans that we're a company that cares.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can increase the prices of our miniatures. That always works.
I don't think that's going to help, sir.
Wait, I've got it. Release Space Marine 2.
That actually might please
We're gonna set a trap.
Okay, right.
Haven't you noticed that since Total War Warhammer 3's coming out, everyone's forgotten that we're a horrible company? We just gotta do the same with the 40k fanboys. And we're quids in. Here's the plan. By releasing Space Marine 2, our loyal fanboys will flock to us. And you know that they will not be able to resist Space Marine 2. And anyone who doesn't like it is clearly a traitor. And our loyal fanboys will cancel them out for us.
Maybe just pay your employees more.
What are you on about? Just feed your kids with that discount plastic I give you.
Hey guys, Julie K here at E3 2011. We're here at the THQ booth and we're gonna talk about Space Marines.
Ooh.
I think this guy's ready to go. Let's go.
Ooh, you due for a treat? Gobbing me nozzle.
Space Marine. The very name brings back nostalgic memories to many Warhammer fans. I myself remember going into my local game shop and buying Space Marine for PlayStation 3 when it first launched. Like a lot of people, I would have put my money down that Space Marine 2 was not going to happen. I even made a skit taking the piss about it. So I've been debating with myself what to make a video about. With the announcement of Space Marine 2, I had two choices. The first was a Space Marine review, which there are plenty of already. The second was a speculation video on Space Marine 2, and once again there are many of those already out, which are really good. But after watching a few of those, I noticed a lot of people wanted a lot of different things from the sequel. Different races, factions and chapters making an appearance, improving the combat mechanics to be even deeper, an engaging story that respects the lore, a 12+ hour campaign, multiplayer to be expanded from what it originally was, and no microtransactions or scummy DLC.
Pre-order now at GameStop to get the Emperor's Elite Pack for free.
Wow!
Whilst I think all of those are fair points, everyone has in their own mind what they want Space Marine 2 to be. That it's going to live up to this decade-long hype. Obviously no one wants a repeat of
Dawn of War 3, powered by Simon Miller, and today...
But with everyone wanting a bunch of different things for the sequel, how do we know who's right? So I decided for this video we are going to look back in time for what the devs of Space Marine originally visioned the game to be. Oliver Hollis-Leek, who is the creative director of Space Marine 2, has already promised they studied the hell out of the first game before working on the sequel, and I believe that. You don't work on something as big as Space Marine 2 without thoroughly looking at what the original did right and what their developers were aiming for in the first place. By us looking back at the developers of Space Marine, we can see if they uphold that promise of what Space Marine 2 was originally visioned to be, not overhype our expectations, and use this video as a reference to look back on if Space Marine 2 fails.
Humanity has always looked skyward for its true path. Forged in blood, tempered in battle. We are the living weapons of humanity. The Space Marines.
This was the first ever trailer of Space Marine shown at E3 in 2009. And the trailer did not tell you much other than Space Marines fighting orcs. There was a few placeholder models in the trailer like the War Boss that looked like it came from Dawn of War 2, and there was also hints to Executions 2 which made it into the final game. We now see this parodied in the sequel trailer with the Tyranids, which is a nice nod to the original Space Marine trailer. I'm now upset we never got Ancients or Standard Bearers. That would have been sick for the Exterminatus mode. As you'll find out later in the video, it was not the only thing scrapped from the game. But Space Marine was being developed by Relic. They had just come off the success of working with Games Workshop on Dawn of War 1 and 2, and have been wanting to work on something different. Like a lot of us, Relic talked about the tabletop standpoint of Warhammer, and what it would be like to be in that first person perspective seeing all this fighting going on. This spawned Space Marine. There was only one interview from E3 2009 with David Chong, the art director of Space Marine, and they talked about this in that interview.
The property itself, if you played a tabletop war game, you're always imagining what it's like to be on the ground with these guys. So this is an action RPG game where every button press has a brutal result on screen. So you'll be decapitating this and that. And
the trailer in 2009 got many good responses. Some people thought you were going to control a squad, but that was never confirmed. Of course, you had some people complaining about the Ultramarines, which is just like a standard now. It wouldn't be a Warhammer game without people complaining. Just how I like it. But the game was still 2 years out of release, and it wasn't until E3 2010 that people saw a version of the game that resembled the final product.
That's disappointing.
You know, if something had been teased like that today and not in the final game, there would be a riot. But like the standard bearers, killer cans were scrapped from the game. But as you can see, this trailer was looking far more like the Space Marine game we've all played. Moving on to E3 2011, it was Showtime.
Hey, we're THQ representing Space Marines.
I wish they were at my local Warhammer store. Unfortunately, in the Kingdom of Great Britain, we get a mix of the inbred and the no hygiene variety. You don't go into your local Warhammer store and see Henry Cavill. You instead see people cosplaying as Great Unclean Ones without the costumes.
We're here at the Space Marine game, and I am standing in between two
touched me. A woman touched me. I'm no longer a virgin.
This just reminds me of a certain meme. I'm sure you guys can guess which one. Hey look, they've got a moving Deathwind launcher in the background. How cool is that? But E3 2011 was underway, and THQ had spared no expense, when they actually had money. They were showing off 3 games, being Space Marine, Dawn of War 2 Retribution, and Warhammer 40k Kill Team? I need to look at that at some point. They also had a drop pod you could go inside, and Space Marines walking around.
Oh crap. Ultramarine, we better get out of here.
I want to cosplay as a Space Marine so bad. One day I will do it. In fact, I now have a Patreon, so you can simp for me if you want to support my videos. Anyway, at E3 they were letting people get their hands on the game for the first time, and they were answering many important questions about the game.
Got one here from Ben Lau, who is apparently a fan of the series, asking about Terminator armors.
Ah, that question comes up a lot, yeah. Pronounce that correctly. Will there be Terminator armor in the game? You know, we've got a lot of stuff in place.
If you don't get the joke, go watch the Armor 3 video. But what is it with people and Terminator armor? First it was Space Marine, then Eternal Crusade, now Armor 3. Face the facts. Firstborn Marines and Terminators are dead. I even predicted Space Marine 2 would be Primaris. So during all these events and showcases, there's been many interviews with the developers and dev diaries released, and I've watched all of them. From this, I think I've identified the developers' key vision for Space Marine, and what I hope Saber Interactive have taken on board. I'm going to start with the combat.
The combat system in Space Marine is a unique system. You take a look at the Space Marine again, he's huge, he's big, he's powerful, but he's not limited to one form of combat over another. He's a master of all combat.
The whole basis of achieving this combat system is the animation engine. It's the ability to transition between 2 different animations and make them blend seamlessly.
Combat is at the forefront of the game, and there's 4 key things that make it Space Marine, and the first one is one you've already heard, switching between melee and ranged combat seamlessly. A big part of the Space Marine game is going from chopping up a bunch of orcs with a chainsword straight into using a bolt gun against Chaos Space Marines. And there's no barrier between doing that. Something many people don't acknowledge is how hard it is to get animations to move between 2 fighting types smooth. The game may not have in-depth combat with either spamming mouse button 1 or F combinations, but moving between those melee combinations and range weapons is something very unique, and that needs to be upholded in the sequel.
Our camera system is very versatile in the ability to switch from range combat to melee combat and back again in a very short amount of time.
That combination of the really sort of up-close and personal melee combat that we have in our game, combined with the devastating range weapons we have, creates this very unique combat experience that you've never played before.
Moving on, there was an interview at E3 2009 with Raphael van Lierop, who was the game director of Space Marine. And around the same time Space Marine was being shown off at these events, there was another challenger. Gears of War 3 was set to release in 2011 right alongside Space Marine. With that already being an established game franchise, Raphael was asked how Space Marine will compete.
Take a look at the two games and you see some similarities sort of on the superficial way, but as soon as you have the controller in your hands, you understand that Space Marine is a completely different experience. We also have chosen to not have a snap to cover system, which is sort of going to be a key differentiator for us, because pretty much every third-person action game has that right now. And the reasons for that are two.
I think a lot of people agree. Against the Orcs, no cover system worked beautifully in Space Marine. However, one complaint in the later levels against Chaos with their ranged weapons was having no cover system made the game feel awkward. But this is something the devs intended, and I feel Saber Interactive should honour that. Raphael continues to say it goes against their original vision and the lore of what a Space Marine is like in combat. Having a Snap 2 cover system I think will make Space Marines feel too much like other games, and lose that niche of feeling like a superhuman warrior. So for any of you saying, Space Marine 2 should have a cover system because it would be really cool, off. I don't think Space Marine should have or ever have a cover system. In many of these interviews, he talks about some of the key mechanics in Space Marine, one being where in most video games you take damage and look for cover. In Space Marine, you're encouraged to do the opposite by running into combat and getting an execution to get health back.
You know, when you're low on health, what's a Space Marine do? Well, a Space Marine doesn't run away and hide. A Space Marine runs into battle and gets even more aggressive. So you go in there and you knock guys around, you pick them up and do some kind of devastating, like sync kill move where you execute them in a very bloody way and harvest health that way.
In Space Marine, the quickest way to regenerate your health is to stay in the fight, pulling over-the-top execution moves. This will restore your health much quicker than avoiding the battle.
We're going to need to get a list. So far we've got seamless melee and range combat, no cover systems, and executions to get health back. Pretty simple. Raphael carries on to talk about the progression system of the game. In Space Marine, you unlock new weapons and gear through a linear progression system.
The weapons in 40,000 IP as a whole are pretty much an order of magnitude greater than anything we have or have even conceived.
The player starts with basic weaponry, a ranged weapon, a melee weapon. As the game progresses, we unlock new abilities, new upgrades, and new weapons.
So we've got like the heavy bolter, plasma cannon, all these crazy over-the-top weapons that you use till they're done, and then you kind of cast them away.
Raphael talks about how these weapons are given to you at key moments in the campaign, like the bolter is given to you when you first encounter a shooter orc, the heavy bolter when you defend an area, the jump packs where there's elevated ground, etc. I personally love this type of progression system in a game, that you use a new tool to overcome an obstacle, or in Space Marine's term, a new weapon for a new foe. I'm going to add that to the list as a key mechanic of Space Marine. We've seen Relic actually do this before with the original Dawn of War when you unlock new units. Can you guys imagine that we get sent down to deal with a Tyranid invasion with nothing but a heavy bolt pistol and a combat knife again? Fun fact, the Vengeance launcher only exists in Space Marine and was only created in lore for the game. Anyway, we're now moving on to the most important trait of the Space Marine franchise.
That is the business of the Inquisition, Ultramarines.
If I was to ask you what Space Marine is, what would you say? Some of you may say a Warhammer 40k experience, others may say a third-person shooter. But the developers had a very key way of describing the game.
Us taking that IP and delivering it to people in an action blockbuster.
This game is an action blockbuster experience set in the world of Warhammer 40,000
as an action blockbuster experience. Like over-the-top blockbuster action. It's an action blockbuster experience in the 40k world. It's not something that's ever been done before.
So what is a blockbuster? Well, if you look at some very successful blockbuster games like Marvel's Spider-Man, Witcher 3, The Legend of Zelda, Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War, these games all have a massive emphasis on the story. Space Marine at its core is a blockbuster action game.
What we're going for with Space Marine is really a huge, epic experience.
At the heart of the cinematic approach that we've taken with Space Marine is this idea that we have, which we call play the story, which is essentially, we want the player to experience the story firsthand when they're in control.
Wrap an entire experience around just that character, and it was it's been really exciting for us to kind of be able to look at the 40K IP from a different point of view. So we're not sort of 100 feet away from the RTS camera anymore. We're putting you right in the sort of the boots of that character and let you experience what it feels like to be that powerful fighter.
There are key reasons why the developers say this. You play as Captain Titus, and the whole game and story is based around that point of view. When Space Marine first came out, a lot of people said, why can't we fly the Thunderhawk or play as a Dreadnought or Guardsman? Well, that's not what Space Marine is. If in the sequel we play as anything else than Lieutenant Titus's point of view, that's not the same game, and people should not be expecting that. If in the story it has written that Titus dies, that's a separate thing. I'm talking about purely switching from a character to a character throughout the game. Then again, Titus may get killed at the start by a strong independent guardsman called Mira seeking revenge like The Last of Us 2. Actually, can we acknowledge that Mira is pretty badass? She didn't give a shit about the Inquisition's threat.
Ignore his threats. Come on.
Moron.
But I'm going to add that to the list. Unless he dies or passes the torch to a new character, it should be Titus we're playing. Moving on.
Several of the iconic 40K vehicles in the game. We have some big action set piece moments that incorporate those vehicles. There's a sort of a global battle that's going on, and you have a very specific mission within that battle. So the battle rages around you while you go in, and you have this very specific, like I said, sort of almost like a Saving Private Ryan meets Heart of Darkness.
Action set pieces are a key part of Space Marine. These are moments in the story that are just pure chaos. Moments like firing the weapon to kill the orcs, Grimskull vs Nemeroth, when the Valkyrie crashes from an action scene and you go straight into the gameplay. For 10 years ago, that's quite impressive with no loading screen. Some games today still can't get that right. But all of those moments are like a movie, and that's what the developers wanted. Carrying on from that, you have a global battle raging around you whilst you're doing your mission objective. From the very start of the game, you understand that there's a full-on war going on around you. Like, you'll notice the planetary defense gun firing miles away with shockwaves that come closer. You see orcs in the distance shooting and running around, guardsmen fighting orcs in a last stand attempt, and other Valkyries being attacked. Like Raphael said, this has nothing to do with you. You have an objective and the war rages on around you. I'm adding a global battle to the list because that's what puts you in the Warhammer 40k universe. So far in Space Marine 2 gameplay, you can see that the developers are doing this, with the Chimera and Guardsmen around Titus, and Tyranids attacking in the background. I'm glad they are still doing that. The last part of the blockbuster is the characters, and who better to tell you than the voice actor of Titus, Mark Strong.
I play Captain Titus, who's the leader of the Space Marines. And he is a 7-foot fighting machine. He is a warrior monk. There's a Zen element to him that allows him to perhaps question things that other Space Marines wouldn't. Titus's comrades essentially are extreme ends of the spectrum. Leandros, who is the raw, young, new recruit who lives by the rulebook and would die by the rulebook, given the chance. In Titus's mind, I think he can see a young, wet behind the ears character who hasn't yet learned through experience how to deal with the various problems that are going to be thrown at him. Consequently, he can be pretty annoying, but Titus puts up with him because he understands it's just immaturity.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrowly?
I suppose he has a natural distrust of anybody who lives by the book.
The search for answers must wait. What if that is too late? You forget yourself, Ultramarine.
Sidonis is perhaps he's his equal. He's certainly a battle-hardened veteran of many campaigns, and is probably Titus's closest companion if he has such a thing. He trusts him, relies on him, would have him as his point man in any given situation.
Never trust the Inquisition!
The whole game of Space Marine is based around the three characters Titus, Leandros and Sidonis. Obviously there are other characters like Grimskull, Mira and Drogon, but it's the conflict between the three main characters that the developers wanted for the story to focus around. That's why I'm adding to the list character/dialogue, because I'm putting my money down right now that these two other Astartes in the trailer would just be as important in the story as the first two were. Now, I'm not saying all those points make a Space Marine game. There are many other factors that people appreciate and resonate with, like how lore accurate the game is, the little quotes after you die, the Fury ability, but looking at what the developers valued helps keep expectations grounded. But after E3, the advertisement had started, from showcasing the weapons and hyping up the game. Space Marine was getting closer to the launch date and finally went gold.
I am a warrior from 40,000 years in the future.
My skin can secrete a protective substance that lets me survive in extreme heat.
I am master of the chainsword.
I can enter a catatonic state to recover from mortal wounds.
I can fly like a bird of prey. I am a Space Marine.
I am a Space Marine.
I am a Space Marine.
Space Marine available now.
I hope they redo that advert for Space Marine 2. Dawn of War 3 may have some competition then. I don't need to tell you how successful Space Marine was in sales. It did very well. Some people complained about the lack of diverse environments and how short the story was for a AAA game, but for 2011 it was good for that era of gaming. I'm going to speak briefly about the multiplayer.
Good day, Space Marine recruit. You are accessing Codex entry, multiplayer war simulation. To keep their wits and focus sharp, Space Marines often participate in training exercises.
From the very start of Space Marine, Relic had always said that multiplayer was a big part of it.
Will there be much of a multiplayer aspect aside from the story mode? There absolutely will be. We're not confirming too much about that today, but I can tell you we will have a very competitive multiplayer experience, a full customization experience with that as well, and we will have co-op features coming in the future. So.
Space Marine launched with 8v8 Annihilation and Seize Ground. Many people may not remember, but the Exterminatus mode came out 30 days after launch. And I think a lot of people now expect the Exterminatus mode to be there day one with the sequel, and I agree. But multiplayer was really about customization and playing as the chapter you wanted to be. And unlike a lot of games today with loot boxes and skins as DLC, Space Marine gave you a lot of choice, which is why I'm adding that to the list. Focus Home Interactive need to think very carefully about how they go about doing this, because I doubt many people will be willing to pay 20 quid to play as a chapter.
You could see, you know, this being a return thing for Relic, like a franchise basically.
Absolutely,
instead of just a game.
no, absolutely. I mean, Space Marine is the first of a franchise. We've created, you know, a whole cast of characters. It's a story that's specific for Space Marine. We've got Captain Titus, who's our franchise hero. I mean, for us, this is the first game in what we look at as a franchise, and we're just excited for fans and all gamers to get it in their hands and play it. We hope they love it, and we look forward to being able to make more of them.
To recap, I think Saber Interactive should stick to what Relic's vision was. Many of you may disagree or have other ideas, but I believe that this list is what makes a Space Marine game, and I hope that this retrospective gives recognition to those developers. It's been a bit of a different, shorter video, but I'm not going to drag it out unless there's something that I need to say and it can be entertaining. For my next video, I fancy getting stuck into a review, and I would like to get Battle Sector done before Chaos Gate comes out, so we're doing that next.